Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhan Hari. Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhan Hari. Yashodanandana Brajaganandana Yashodanandana Brajaganandana Jamana Jaya Gopi Jaya Ballabha Girivardhan Hari. Jaya Gopi Jaya Ballabha Girivardhan Hari. Girivardhan Hari. Yashodanandana Brajaganandana Yashodanandana Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Gaur Pimanasti, Jai Vishupad Paramahamsa, Sri Bhradika Sadhu Stotra Satta, Sri Srimad His Divine Grace, Thirabai Charanarvind Bhakti Vedanta Swami Sera Prabhupada Ki, Grantha Koti Vaishnava Vrind Ki, Skandi BT, Founder Acharyas Divine Grace Sera Prabhupada Ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Samavata Bhakta Vrind Ki, Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Jai Thai Gaur Pimanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Vivishakam Vitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Stuti Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Sridham Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayasabhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamashloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamhitam Uttama Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasya Namaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God as Sridham Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Sarabhyai Namaha. Om Sarabhyai Namaha. Om Sarabhyai Namaha. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yakripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Vinataranam. Yakripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Vinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our morning Bhagavatam class. We are beginning a new chapter this morning. We have covered in the last 1 week or so chapter 11, the first of 5 very important chapters that are focused actually on the subject matter of Varnasrama Dharma, which is in many ways still very less understood by many of our devotees, unfortunately. And what we don't realize actually is that it's like the title of these 2 chapters, the perfect society. Bhagavatam is giving us perfect knowledge, and this perfect knowledge is eternal knowledge as well. I mean, these are basic things we learn when we begin to study Vedic literatures. It is not ordinary knowledge. It is pure, eternal. That is why it is referred to as Sanatana Dharma. And therefore, what we find in the pages of the Bhagavatam, similar to Bhagavad Gita, they are eternal instructions or teachings, which in many ways are will make things much more simple in our personal, individual lives, as well as our collective lives as communities, as societies, as countries, or whatever it may be. So we decided to, we were actually reading somehow a section of the second canto for quite a few months. And then I thought it would be good to again highlight this section, although we constantly refer to this particular, we can say it is Narada Muni's dissertation. You know, when you do your doctoral research, you have to write a thesis or a dissertation. And I consider this as Narada Muni's, doctoral dissertation on the subject matter of Varnasrama Dharma. And just to remind devotees again, Narada Muni is, of course, we all know, a very exalted personality, one of the 12 Mahajans. His specialty is that he is simultaneously the most expert on two interconnected and interrelated subject matters, one being bhakti. He is actually the, we could say, specialist. He specializes in the subject matter of bhakti, devotional service. And simultaneously, which I think is probably rare amongst our acharyas, amongst our authorities, it's definitely rare within ISKCON, to find someone who is expert in the science of bhakti and simultaneously expert in the science of Varnasrama Dharma. Which could be said in another way, that he is simultaneously expert in because bhakti is primarily, mainly spiritual science, whereas Varnasrama Dharma is a material science. Material science, which is actually, when properly understood and properly applied, is no longer material. And therefore, it is referred to by Srila Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam as the divine culture. Sanatana Dharma, Prabhupada in many places actually equates it practically to Varnasrama Dharma and to divine culture. He renders the meaning of Varnasrama Dharma as divine culture. It is our divine culture while we are here in the material world. And many aspects of that culture are also there in the spiritual world. It's not that Krishna, in his pastimes in Vrindavan, is celebrated or known primarily as a Gopala, as a caretaker of cows. But that's what's going on in the spiritual world, primarily, isn't it? Chintamani Dham, the home and the residence and of the original Surabhi cows, from whom all the cows in the material world actually originate or come from. So simply to underline how important it is actually to not only read, but to discuss, to study, and even more important, to apply, to put into practice these principles that are presented in these chapters of the Bhagavatam. And I cannot overemphasize how, especially at this junction in our history means ISKCON's history and the world history simultaneously. How it is, we it's just like it happens to all of us in our lives. Oh, if only I had known, if only I had understood, then I would have done something different. And in many ways, it's sad to say, but many of us will be finding ourselves making such statements in the future. Main reason being that our founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, has sufficiently, more than sufficiently, I would say, explained and practically speaking, pounced on this point, emphasized, I mean, right up until his last days in Vrindavan as well, which I heard some devotees could not understand why Prabhupada, in the last days, the last hours of his physical pastime presence with us, instructs his disciples, therefore, to curtail these heavily prominent modes of material nature, modes of passion, modes of ignorance that are all pervading in the world today. Therefore, there is a need to introduce Varnasrama Dharma. So we have studied the first chapter, the perfect society for social classes, and I've chosen text number 7 because most of the other texts are either not having any purport. I see the first 5 texts don't have a purport. Number 6 has a short one. So anyways, let's go to text number 7 right now. Varjayet Ramada Gatham Agrihasto Brihad Vrattaha Indriyani Pramathini Haranti Api Yater Manaha Varjayat Pramada Gatham Agrihasto Brihat Vrataha Indriyani Pramathini Haranchapi Yater Manaha Varjayat Pramada Gatham Agrihasto Brihat Vrataha Indriyani Pramathatini Haranchapi Yater Manaha Varjayat Pramada Gatham Agrihasto Brihat Vrataha Indriyani Pramathini Haranchapi Yater Manaha Vajayat Pramada Gatham Agrihasto Brihat Vrataha Indriyani Pramathini Haranchapi Yater Manaha Vajayat Pramada Gatham Agrihasto brihatvrataha Indriyani pramatini Rantyapi yater manaha Vajayat pramadagatham Agrihasto brihatvrataha Indriyani pramatini Arantyapi yater manaha Vajayat pramadagatham Agrihasto brihatvrataha Indriyani pramatini Rantyapi yater manaha Vajayat must give up Pramada Gatham Gatham talking with women Agrihastaha a person who has not accepted the Grihastha ashrama in bracket means a brahmachari or sannyasi. Brihat vrataha invariably observing the vow of celibacy. Indriyani, the senses. Pramatini, always almost unconquerable. Haranti, take away. Api, even. Yatehe, of the sannyasi. Manaha, the mind. So before reading the translation to text 7, we're just going to go back here, beginning from text 1. I will just read the Sanskrit and then give the translation. Not necessary to repeat the Sanskrit. Sri Narada Uvacha Brahmachari Gurukule Vasandanto Guror Hitam Acharan Dasavan Nicho Guru Sudridha Thoridaha. Translation. Narada Muni said, a student should practice completely controlling his senses. He should be submissive and should have an attitude of firm friendship for the spiritual master. With a great vow, the brahmachari should live at the Gurukula only for the benefit of the Guru. Text number 2. Satyam pratar upasita gurvagnyarka sarotamam sandhye ubhe sayata vag japam brahma samahitaha. Translation. At both injunctions of day and night, namely in the early morning and in the evening, he should be fully absorbed in thoughts of the spiritual master, fire, the sun god, and Lord Vishnu, and by chanting the Gayatri mantra, he should worship them. Text number 3. Chandam syadi yita guror ahutas chet suyantritaha upakrame vasane cha taranao shirasa namet. Translation. Being called by the spiritual master, the student should study the Vedic mantras regularly every day before beginning his studies, and at the end of his studies, the disciples should respectfully offer obeisances unto the spiritual master. Text 4. Me kalagna, me kalajina, vasamsi jata danda kaman dalunna bibriad upabitam bibriad upabitam cha darba panir yatoditam. Translation. Carrying pure kusha grass in his hand, the brahmachari should dress regularly with a belt of straw and with deer skin garments. He should wear matted hair, carry a rod and water pot, and be decorated with a sacred thread as recommended in the Shastras. Text 5. Sayam pratas sharad bhaksyam guravetan nivedayat bunjita yajanu nochad upavasat kvachit. Translation. The brahmachari should go out morning and evening to collect alms, and he should offer all that he collects to the spiritual master. He should eat only if ordered to take food by the spiritual master. Otherwise, if the spiritual master does not give this order, he may sometimes have to fast. My God, who wants to be a brahmachari? Text number 6. Sushilo mita bhug daksha sradadhano jitendriya yavad artam vyavaharat strishu stri nirjiteshu cha. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. A brahmachari should be quite well behaved and gentle and should not eat or collect more than necessary. He must always be active and expert, fully believing in the instructions of the spiritual master and the Shastra. Fully controlling his senses, he should associate only as much as necessary with women or those controlled by women. Purport. A brahmachari should be very careful not to mix with women or with men addicted to women. Although when he goes out to beg alms, it is necessary to talk with women and with men very much attached to women, this association should be very short, and he should talk with them only about begging alms and not more. A brahmachari should be very careful in associating with men who are attached to women. And today's text, Vashayat Pramada Agrihasto Brihad Vrataha Indriyani Pramatini Haranchapi Yater Manaha. Translation and purport. A brahmachari, or one who has not accepted the You just have to wait for electricity to come. Oh, okay. So, so we our whole civilization should serve as an example, is serving as an example of what happens when we deviate from dharma, especially in this most important matter of neglecting to give this type of training and education, which goes to the heart of modern education as well, where, you know, it is practically illegal to establish a what is it? An educational institution only for men, because it will be considered or seen as discrimination. You see, because of total lack of understanding of some very fundamental basic principles that are nicely presented in the pages of the Bhagavatam, which are fundamental pillars of the Vedic culture, which are, of course, totally unknown in modern day society, and some of these principles our very own devotees are struggling with as well. You see. So this is in these few verses we have read the aspect of built in, we can call it built-in segregation of the of genders. Vedic culture intentionally, purposely, and for very good reasons has built-in practices which intentionally separate men and women. You see, we hear, I mean, like for us, it's practically unimaginable because I've never had that experience, like in my family life before becoming a devotee. But we hear about how in the ancient, so-called ancient times, the Vedic, those who follow the Vedic culture, men had their quarters because it was like what is it? Extended family. Extended family. So men had their quarters and women had their quarters, and one would not, we were talking about, because that's also very important, fundamental aspect of Vedic culture, samskaras, beginning with the Garbhadhana samskara. So the Garbhadhana samskara is just like hair cutting ceremony, or taking of grains. These are different samskaras, and people generally they call their friends. They announce it, and they celebrate. Well, in previous times, the Garbhadhana samskara was like that. We cannot imagine, how it was. It was known and it was considered as most auspicious because one is meant, Vedic culture bases activities on what is recommended in the Shastra, and some of these things are in accordance also with, just like we fast on Ekadasis, So one may say, well, astrology is not important. Well, if astrology is not important, then we would never know about which days are which, isn't it? Because it's not always obvious which day is Ekadasi. Sometimes because of the tithi changes that may be there from one place to another. I mean, we have this situation here in India, where, for example, South India, they celebrate Ekadasi on one day, the next day they celebrate it in North India. Same country. But anyways, the point is that Vedic culture is the most scientific culture based on scientific principles and concepts, which, if understood, if followed, will give the ideal result. Ideal result being that it will favor our practice of spiritual life, but not only that, it will also favor our material way of living, our material life, isn't it? This is the one of the first instructions that Narada Muni gave, like in the last chapter. Dharma mulam hi bhagavan sarva vedam ayo harihi smritam chat abidam raja niyena chatma prasidati. Everything becomes satisfied, all of the necessities of life, be they material, emotional, psychological, social, or spiritual, all of the necessities of life will automatically be provided for when we follow the principles of Dharma, isn't it? And so these principles of Dharma are not are not things that change constantly. They are based on the how Krishna created this material world. Krishna created all the living entities, and amongst all of the different creatures, within rather all of the different species, 8,400,000 species. In all of the species, there's the male aspect and the female aspect. And this is especially, I mean, below the human species, things happen automatically, and there's no karmic reaction there. But in the human species, it is it is different, because the consciousness is of a different nature. Human species have that distinct feature of having higher consciousness, developed consciousness, where one can cultivate this type of knowledge and learn, as Krishna explains, pravritim cha, nivritim cha, janana vidur asura. Those who don't know what is to be done, what is not to be done, they are classified as asura. Asura is not only people with horns coming out of the head, but people who are of impure consciousness, asura. So all of us, until we become pure devotees, we are asuric. We have asuric tendencies. Prabhupada makes this point here also. Even somebody in the sannyas order, if he's not cautious, he'll be, I mean, we have so many examples within our own society, isn't it? So this is like a fundamental principle that today is like totally washed away, isn't it, in modern day society? The people don't want to hear about it also. That is most unfortunate, and it is unfortunate in that it is bringing, it is destroying the lives of so many people, and destroying especially the opportunity for these conditioned souls to actually come out of their miserable condition. Vedic knowledge is there to actually put an end to our miserable condition, to the suffering of humanity. I mean, that's and this is only possible. It's just like a doctor, a physician. If someone has been well trained and knows the science of medicine, he'll be able to cure somebody. So similarly, all of us in the human form of life, we have this opportunity to cultivate this knowledge. And without cultivating this knowledge, without knowing about these principles, then we cannot cure our disease, what to speak of helping the disease of others as well, which is basically the same disease. So just to close on this point, just reiterating, just like a few days ago, we read this one section in the previous chapter where after describing in 4 verses, Narada Muni describes in 4 verses the qualities and characteristics of the 4 Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And then if one is a little bit attentive, he will notice that immediately after finishing these 4 verses and explaining about the Varnas, in 5 verses he explains about the duties and qualities and characteristics of women. Isn't it? He is not mixing that within the Varnas. Anyway, I don't want to go back to the previous chapter. We're in this chapter here, but I'm mentioning this simply to underline that whatever great personalities like Narada Muni are presenting, whatever we find in the pages of the Bhagavatam, in the Vedic literatures, this is knowledge that that we need to assimilate, that we need to understand, which is unchanging knowledge also, because human nature is human nature. 5,000 years ago, when the Battle of Kurukshetra took place, everyone was eating at least twice a day, if not 3 times a day. I mean, human nature is human nature. The basic psychology is also there, basic psychology, which is different also between men and women. So therefore the need, the importance to hear these explanations given by this very unique, exalted personality, Srila Narada Muni, and learn from those instructions, because ultimately, I mean, this should be our conviction. This is what Srila Prabhupada has taught us, that unless society, unless people adopt these principles, there is no hope for society. Unless people learn about these 4 basic principles of life, what we call the 4 pillars of dharma, unless people develop these qualities of satyam, daya, tapa, saucham, then society will simply, as we say, go into the dogs, isn't it? Will be ruining the lives of individuals. And the end result is that, there's continuous, it's all based on ignorance, isn't it? If we don't have knowledge of the Vedas, that means we are in ignorance. Because Veda means knowledge. So without knowledge means no knowledge, ignorance, yeah. So ignorance is what is the cause of suffering. And knowledge is the opposite. When we cultivate knowledge, we can put an end to our suffering. At all levels, actually. That was a big concern in India. More recently, always concerns are coming up about the soil. Big propaganda you might have read or heard about the soil condition in the world, which is, of course, has been a concern for quite some time, and many individuals have brought this up as well. And I mean, soil is directly related or connected with subsistence, means food. If you don't have good soil, if your soil is a desert, you're going to die in that desert, right? So there's a whole, I mean, soil is um, a main topic also discussed in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna speaks about the need and the importance for growing food, but growing food in a again following prescribed ways that are not harming the soil or harming other living entities, etc., like that. So whatever it is that we look at, there are guiding concepts and principles that are very clearly established, and that are what is very unique about this Vedic knowledge, Vedic teachings. These concepts and principles are unchanging concepts and principles. And once we learn them, then it's like, you know, our books of knowledge, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, 5,000 years ago, people were reading and studying Bhagavatam. And after 5,000 years, we are still reading and studying the same books, the same philosophy, the same notions, the same concepts, the same principles. And those are much more simplified than what we are confronted with in modern day society, where books are changing all the time, concepts are changing all the time, because people don't know. So they're just speculating. I'll just read here the last verse, and then if there's any or one who has accepted the Grihastha ashram, family life, must originally avoid talking with women or about women, for the senses are so powerful, a matter of the order of life. Comments or questions?
Special attention that's new in the Vedic but in modern society, many of them are like fighting for equal rights and want to be men. But at the same time, like Asian country, I don't know about the Western country, that they will say that there's special parking place for women, special compartment thing. So they are still unconsciously, I think they are still want to give that protection.
Okay, so you're making the point that in our Vedic culture, as we read, that very clearly it is establishing the need, the importance of giving special protection to women, whereas in our modern day setup, we are promoting equality, equal rights, and freedom. You didn't say it, but women's liberation. But still, in some places and in some countries, you mentioned that they have some provision in some instances for, especially for women. So it seems that there is still some remnants of that. Basically, is what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, but those remnants are very small, very insignificant, and overall, Prabhupada very boldly, quite, uh, kind of upfront stated many years ago how this whole women's liberation was invented by the men to exploit the women. So, because it's a deviation from what Vedic culture is teaching. That there are again the whole subject matter of prescribed duties is mentioned in both the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and ultimately every living entity needs protection. But in the material world, it's just the reality of life. A child needs special attention. If you allow a child to play with a knife, he's going to cut himself. Very often, Prabhupada gives himself as an example. I was playing with matches as a young boy, just about, fire. He was showing, he burnt himself somewhere, I don't know. And he mentioned, I still have that mark. So there are, even in ordinary life, those who are parents know that little children, they have to be given proper care and attention and special protection. So Vedic culture is extending that to other members of society, like the cows, for example. Cows also need special protection, but these things are not followed, and therefore there's so much of exploitation. Bottom line is that either the term Sanatan Dharma means Sanatan Dharma or it doesn't. Otherwise, we have to find a new term. Throw it out the window. It's too old. It's old-fashioned. No. Sanatan Dharma is there for a reason, because it is based on eternal principles and concepts, and that is totally alien, completely alien in modern day society. And because people are generally so much caught up in these lower modes of material nature, they don't want to hear about it, because people are just so attached to doing what they want. And why put any restrictions? I'm okay, you're okay, everything's, And if we as devotees, this is our challenge, a challenge to ourselves. As devotees who are members of an international society, our big challenge is to work these things out amongst ourselves, because only if that is done can we become more effective in actually dealing with the outside world, or with people who are not knowing about Krishna consciousness. If we that point was made by Srila Prabhupada often as well. If we cannot show by example, we speak about establishing a self-sufficient communities. If we cannot create and demonstrate and show models of self-sufficient communities, then people won't hear us. Why they'll listen to us? Do it. We're not doing it. At least we're not doing it on as Prabhupada intended or wanted us. And we're definitely not giving the kind of attention and importance and priority as we should. Any other thoughts? Okay. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Gaur Premanand.